Nana. Oh, you feel so good.
Oh my god, bro.
Oh, hell no, man.
So, not too long ago, unless you've been living under a rock in the animation space, you might have heard of a little movie called Fixed, which has been a long-time passion project of animation legend Genndy Tartokovsky. And especially if you're in the animation space, you're probably familiar with the rather divisive reception this film currently has.
Everything was in this film's favor, until we learned it's a raunchy comedy centered around a dog getting neutered.
Gonna go out there and suck every bit of fun out of those balls before you lose them.
We're all gonna suck your balls.
What?
Because this is what passes for comedy now.
It's always so painful when someone whose work you've admired for so long pops out a steamy stinker.
Despite Genndy Tartokovsky being the man behind some of the most acclaimed animated projects of all time, such as Dexter's Lab, Samurai Jack, Symbiotic Titans, Star Wars The Clone Wars, and Primal, this movie has proved really divisive. The general consensus seems to be that people are either just uninterested in this film or just flat out repulsed by it for its, adult sensibilities.
Oh, you feel so good.
As a result, a number of supposed animation fans have taken to Twitter and other platforms to go ahead and harass the animators who worked on this film, and even going as far as to send them death threats. Yes, this is somehow real. I feel like this shouldn't have to be said, but if you don't like a film, please don't go out of your way to harass the people that worked on it. Honestly, it's really wild to see how extreme the reaction to Fixed became overall. But interestingly enough, also relatively recently, a trailer released for a new adult animated show coming to Glitch Productions called Knights of Guinevere. For those who may not be familiar, Glitch Productions is an extremely popular independent animation studio housed right here on YouTube that has created a number of very successful animated shows, such as Murder Drones, Gaslight District, and probably their most popular project, The Amazing Digital Circus. Knights of Guinevere is their latest project that just so happens to be produced by a former Disney alumni, that being Dana Terrace, the creator of The Owl House, a show that was sadly cancelled by Disney before it could fulfill its original vision. Unlike The Owl House, Knights of Guinevere is pretty clearly aimed squarely at an adult audience, embodying a much darker, more body horror type vibe, and it seems people are really eating this up. Unless you're Rev Says Desu or any of the anti-woke drifters who keep spreading lies about ProZD, who's one of the voice actors for this show.
He is espouting this belief that you have to match the ethnicity of the character you are playing, which is so unbelievably ridiculous.
Man, I can't imagine being that miserable to the point where you'd hate someone as wholesome as ProZD. These guys really need to give it a rest. However, much like Fixed, Knights of Guinevere is an adult animated production from an animated creator who is known previously for making a show targeted at children and family audiences before. Although, admittedly in Genndy's case, he's already delved into adult animation territory with Samurai Jack Season 5 and Primal. So looking at the reception between these two pieces of adult animation, and especially looking at the reception to their trailers, why was one so divisive whereas the other one was received pretty well, despite the fact that these creators come from pretty similar backgrounds? Well, on paper, the answer is pretty simple. Fixed had objectively bad marketing and was kind of doomed from the get-go as a result. People just don't want to see dog anus on their screen throughout the entirety of the movie, which, you know, I don't really blame them. Knights of Guinevere, on the other hand, has a genuinely well-done trailer that actually succeeds in drawing people's attention and intrigue in order to make them actually excited for the show. But honestly, I think you could argue the problem goes a lot deeper than that. While I personally wasn't a fan of Fixed, as anyone who follows me on Letterboxd can probably attest to, I do think the hate for it was honestly really overblown. And there does seem to be a particular segment of the animation community that tends to react really volatilely to any animated media that is either raunchy or skewing towards an adult audience. Obviously, this isn't everyone, but it's definitely something that has become a lot more noticeable over the past few years or so, and it's definitely been noticed by others in the animation space as well. So why exactly is reception towards adult animation in such a weird spot in this day and age when arguably there's never been as much adult animation out there before as there is now? That's the question I want to answer today, and also dive into the history of animation for adults overall, when it works for people and when it really doesn't work for people. I'm also going to be recommending some lesser known pieces of adult animation for you to check out later in this video, since even just on its own merit, adult animation is a very large art form, and there are plenty of underrated gems within the medium that I feel like not enough people know about. To start, it's worth explaining where adult animation initially started as an art form to begin with. Technically, the first truly adult piece of animation that hit the big screen for audiences in the US was Ever Ready Harden. Ever Ready Harden was a very raunchy animated short that came out in 1928, the same year as Steamboat Willie, ironically enough. While Mickey was off piloting steamboats, Ever Ready Harden was, doing the horizontal and vertical shuffle. So technically adult animation has been around just as long as some of the most popular and well-known all-audience oriented animation, but it wasn't until the 1970s that it began to really prove itself as a viable, thought-provoking art form. And that's all thanks to the 1972 animated film Fritz the Cat, which made history as the first ever X-rated animated feature. Prior to this, animation for adults had really only ever existed in the context of underground pornography with the previously mentioned Ever Ready Hard-On, and even earlier than that with The Virgin and Hot Pants from 1924. But beyond that, there hadn't really been anything that might make people consider animation aimed purely at adults be anything beyond simple sexual gags that someone might laugh at then move on with their life. There hadn't really been anything that genre-defining or anything that had a true statement to it, but that all changed with Fritz the Cat. Fritz the Cat was a film by pioneering animation director Ralph Bakshi, who initially was inspired to create the film after stumbling upon Robert Crumb's series of Fritz the Cat underground comic books, which is technically what the film is directly based on. Although, given after he saw this film, Crumb actually killed Fritz off in the comics, he'd probably tell you otherwise. Fritz definitely earned its adult rating with the amount of sex, drugs, and violence present in the film, but the thing that truly set it apart from previous forays into animated content for adults is how it was able to tap into the overall movement of the counterculture at the time. Because of this, it ended up being far more than just a series of raunchy gags and really ended up being a political lightning rod for deeper discussions at the time. Rather than just being simple animated pornography like all the other pieces of adult animation that had come before had been, Fritz ended up setting its sights a lot higher and had a greater political message that it was trying to get across to people. And because of this, it really represents the first major shift in the way that animation for adults could be seen as a viable art form rather than just something to goon to. Especially considering how relevant many of the issues it discusses and satirizes were when it came out, such as drug use as a form of escapism, several different civil rights movements at the time, and the concept of free love. This is a film that really resonated a lot with adult audiences around the time of its release, and really got a lot of people talking, and in some ways resulted in even more people getting invested in some of these movements than there had been before. It also ended up being an unprecedented worldwide success, making over $90 million on a budget of just $700,000, making it still one of the biggest indie film successes of all time, even to this day. This is a film that really hit for people culturally when it came out, and it marked a huge shift in how animation for adults would be seen going forward. As a result of this film's success, Ralph Bakshi ended up creating several more adult-oriented animated films that directly tackled societal issues that were able to be deeply relevant and resonate with people at the time. Things like Heavy Traffic, American Pop, and Coonskin, and in doing so, essentially kickstarted the modern adult animation movement. Instead of just being seen as something for kids or general audiences, or something that was simple pornography with no real substance behind it, Bakshi's films had shown the world that animation could have a really strong voice, and if it really wanted to, make a strong political statement as well. Without this small period of experimental, independent animated films in the 1970s, there is no way adult animation would exist in its current form today. Whether you're a fan of Bakshi's films or not, this really was a game changer and a huge revolutionary period for animation overall. And following the 1970s, we would get even more enduring and ongoing ventures into comedy-focused adult animation that even Bakshi wasn't able to achieve, like The Simpsons, Family Guy, Duckman, South Park, King of the Hill, The Critic, Rick and Morty, Bob's Burgers, and so many more. When The Simpsons began airing in 1989, it really changed the landscape of adult-oriented animation, arguably in even more ways than Bakshi did, and really set a precedent for a lot of the kinds of adult animated content that would come to follow. And ultimately, around this time, Bakshi himself ended up losing relevancy, mostly due to the incredibly poor reception of his live-action animated hybrid film Cool World, which, to be honest, was completely deserved. That movie genuinely sucks. Of course, if you like Cool World, more power to you, but I personally was just not a fan whatsoever, and I hope I never have to see that movie again. With Bakshi no longer the center focus as the pioneer of adult animation, however, the new leaders seem to be a wide variety of emerging animated sitcoms, and here, interestingly enough, is where we start to run into the problem. While the majority of these shows are actually genuinely well made, and arguably have remained so even today, like King of the Hill, Futurama, and South Park, and while there's also a lot of great underrated gems to be seen here with things like Duckman or The Critic, when you look at a lot of other adult animated shows that started cropping up as well as part of this movement, especially in the 2000s, you really start to see a major divide in quality. As a result of the general popularity of adult animation, things like Drawn Together, or Big Mouth, or Lord Help Me, The New Norm,
New norm ain't the same as the old norm.
all ended up popping up simply to capitalize on this movement. These shows all tended to be raunchy or edgy just for the sake of being raunchy or edgy, and really lacked the ability to have any kind of societal relevance or anything to really say at all. In a lot of ways, these feel no better than the original pornographic shorts where adult animation got its first roots. Rather than including raunchy and edgy humor but still having something to say and actually having substance, they seem more focused on cheap gags and sex jokes to keep people's attention while putting in the least amount of effort possible, which thankfully usually doesn't work out since these shows tend to get cancelled pretty quickly unless you're a big mouth and you get like 8 seasons. Jesus Christ. Now, if we fast forward to the release of Fixed, and with the added context of how adult animation has both evolved and evolved since the 1970s, it becomes really clear why the reaction to this film was exactly what it was. While some reactions were clearly much more sane than others, the general consensus seemed that people were very unamused and downright dumbfounded by the trailer for this film. The constant dog anus and sex jokes with no real substance to them just weren't working for people, and many thought the film just looked like generic slop attempting to be edgy with no real substance to it, because really, it was. That's exactly what this film ended up being. And to a lot of people, myself included, that really takes away from what adult animation can truly be. While I personally didn't hate this film as much as others I've seen have, I definitely wasn't a fan of it either. The writing was surprisingly really generic for someone like Genndy Tartokovsky, and honestly the movie just isn't funny. Things like Deadpool or South Park often employ a similar style of humor to this and even use some of the same jokes, but the big difference between those and this is really the level of smart writing. There's enough social wit and general cleverness and self-awareness to both Deadpool and South Park to keep those always feeling funny and fresh. A lot of what Fixed's humor just boils down to is basically the kind of humor you'd see in The Secret Life of Pets, but R-rated. It is the most generic, surface-level kind of dog and pet jokes imaginable. And honestly, this film kind of felt like the lowest common denominator, which really sucks because adult animation can be so much more than this. And while a lot of the most extreme reactions to this film really weren't warranted at all, it does almost seem like the general perception on adult animation has shifted to such a degree where a film that shows itself as relying on or incorporating a lot of raunchy humor will almost always immediately be beaten down and disparaged right out the gate. And while there are still some new shows that incorporate raunchy humor that end up still having substance to them, unfortunately the general track record hasn't been too great since the 2000s. But even with this in mind, adult animation as a medium really shouldn't be disrespected overall just because of a number of bad actors, which obviously is the entire thesis of this video. What we really should be doing is hyping up the good projects and projects that actually clearly have effort put in, like Knights of Guinevere, or Primal Season 3 if that ever happens. Ultimately, highlighting the positive examples of adult animation is really the thing that will change this for the better. The more that well done examples of adult animation are highlighted, the more that hopefully studios will learn as time goes on and choose to truly put effort into creating adult animation that has substance, and ultimately has something to say and can resonate with a lot of adult viewers. Things like Common Side Effects or even the new season of King of the Hill from Disney are also great examples of things that you should be highlighting. And even then, if all else fails, there's actually a lot of great foreign animation out there too outside of adult American animation. Since I said I was gonna do this at the start of this video, and this is also something I did in my other Stop Disrespecting Animation video, I'm gonna throw out a few different examples of either underrated American animation that's for adults that you should definitely check out, or foreign animation made for adults that you might have not even heard of before. With animation being such a popular art form the world over, honestly a lot of different pieces of animation that are really great do tend to get overlooked by American audiences. So hopefully you find a new favorite or something you really like in this list I'm about to give you. I really think highlighting obscure animation is something really more people should be doing overall. First one I want to recommend here is Loving Vincent. Loving Vincent is legitimately one of the most unique films I have ever seen, even outside of the realm of animation. For those unaware of what exactly this film is, it acts as a sort of pseudo-biopic for the famous Impressionist painter Vincent van Gogh, who arguably is one of the greatest artists of all time. And unfortunately, he was an artist who wasn't recognized for his genius until the last year of his life, and also encountered many mental struggles throughout his entire life as a result, even cutting off his own ear. Loving Vincent is told through the perspective of a detective investigating Vincent van Gogh's death not too long after he's died, and also talking to different witnesses who knew Vincent van Gogh and getting their personal perspective on what kind of person he was. Probably one of the coolest things about this film, and the thing that's most noticeable at first glance, is that it's entirely animated animated in the painting style of Vincent van Gogh himself. Each frame of animation in this film is an actual oil painting done by an artist replicating Vincent van Gogh's painting style, which is insane dedication. And as a result, it really feels like this is a film prying into Vincent van Gogh's psychology and philosophy about the world around him and how he views everything. It's incredibly brilliant and just a really beautiful film overall. I don't want to spoil too much about the story itself since there are a few surprises that I think are definitely worth seeing for yourself here. But man, if you haven't seen this film, please go watch it. It's absolutely amazing, and there really isn't another animated film like this out there. There's a real art and real dedication behind a film like this especially. Another lesser discussed adult animated film that I actually checked out for the first time when it was recommended on the last animation video is Anomalisa. This is an incredibly unique and deeply psychological animated film from the director of Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind and co-directed by the creator of Moral Orel, which is also a very deeply written and very adult, underrated stop-motion animation, much like this one. Whereas Moral Orel is more about exploring familial trauma, breaking the chain, and dissecting religion as a whole, Anomalisa is more about finding what love really is for someone. But perhaps more deeply, it's about what happens when you look at life superficially and just as a way to find pleasure for your own personal gain at every possible moment. The main character in this film, Michael, a motivational speaker, is exactly the epitome of this in this film. He is someone that has tried all manner of superficial pleasures to make himself happy at every possible moment to the point that now he's just depressed all the time. And now everything around him is mundane and the same to him, and this is directly communicated to the audience because every other person other than Michael has the same exact voice. Much like Loving Vincent, I don't want to give away too much about the plot of this film since it really is just worth watching for yourself, but it's definitely a film that can be interpreted a number of ways, so if you've seen it before, let me know in the comments below what you thought of this movie. I always love hearing other people's takes on deeply psychological films that can be interpreted a number of ways like this. I also want to give a shout out to pretty much every film that Satoshi Kon has made. For those unaware, Satoshi Kon, may he rest in peace, is the legendary anime director behind masterpiece films like Perfect Blue, Millennium Actress, Tokyo Godfathers, and Paprika. I honestly recommend checking all of these out, and for entirely different reasons. I'm gonna put a massive trigger warning over Perfect Blue since there is a lot of psychological torment in this film and also a pretty graphic scene where a woman is SA'd, but it really is a dark masterpiece and really explores the ins and outs and the seedier parts that come with celebrity fandom. Millennium Actress is admittedly a much more palatable film, but also still really deep and also strangely psychological still as well. This film is told from the perspective of a legendary elderly actress who is recounting her life as a young actress, and that's shown visually on screen, but parts of her actual life story are getting mixed up with the parts of the film she's acted in. Not only is it a visual masterpiece, it's really just a masterpiece of storytelling overall, and I highly recommend this film, especially for anyone who wants to make their own film someday. Something like this is absolutely essential viewing in my opinion for any aspiring filmmaker. Tokyo Godfathers is easily the most lighthearted out of all the Satoshi Kon films since rather than being a psychological thriller, it's just a simple comedy. It is still very fun though, and also strangely heartwarming too. The general plot focuses on three homeless people having to care for a baby that they found in a laundromat and also having to overcome their own personal trauma together. It's surprisingly a very wholesome film, which is kind of rare for Satoshi Kon, so I definitely recommend checking it out. And as for Paprika, it's basically Inception before Inception was a thing, so definitely go check that one out too. I'm not saying much about any of these because I'd rather you go watch these films yourself and draw your own conclusion, since they're all awesome. Satoshi Kon really is a master filmmaker and he was gone too soon. Rest in peace, legend. Going into a few more anime, as far as anime series go that don't always get talked about as much as others, I highly recommend Monster. This is an anime that I actually just got done binging not too long ago since the full thing is free on YouTube. And man, I was not disappointed with Monster whatsoever. It's an absolute masterpiece. The initial premise for Monster kicks off with renowned surgeon Kenzo Tenma, who is the most highly regarded surgeon at the hospital he works at. However, he's dissatisfied with the hospital's practice of prioritizing politically influential patients over those in dire need. Case in point, when he is given a surgery to operate on a young boy named Johann Liebert who has just been shot in the head, but then is ordered by his higher-ups to operate on the mayor instead, who just came in after Johann, but is seen by his higher-ups to be the more important patient just because of his political influence. Dr. Tenma, however, actually having a moral spine, decides to operate on the patient he got first, that being Johann, and saves his his life. This, as a result, causes him not only to lose his position at the hospital, but unknowingly save the life of a monster and someone who would change his life forever. Johan is one of the most evil and just straight up diabolical villains in anime, and maybe just anything overall. He is a wildly deep and interesting and well fleshed out villain, just like every character in this show is. The entire story and all of its mysteries are unraveled over 74 episodes, and it's done incredibly well. This is also a very unique anime in the sense it feels more like a David Fincher film put into an anime format rather than a typical fantasy or sci-fi anime that you might normally get. Much like most of David Fincher's works, a lot of the stuff here is incredibly grounded. And in a lot of ways, I think that's what makes a villain like Johan just so terrifying, because he's a very real villain and a very real kind of evil. People like Johan can and have existed in real life. Overall, I urge you to give Monster a chance if you haven't already. It is an absolute masterpiece, and like I said, it's free on YouTube. It is 100% worth your time, and I'm really glad I finally got to watch this show for the first time recently. Another incredibly in-depth anime that's a lot more recent, but was very much overshadowed by the other anime that came out the year it debuted, is Vinland Saga, which unfortunately debuted the same year as Demon Slayer, so it did get a bit shoved off to the side at the time. But yeah, if you've seen Vinland Saga, then you know why it's good. Funny enough, I was actually introduced to Vinland Saga through the manga that the anime is based on a number of years ago now. It's an epic sprawling saga about the personal growth and journey of a Viking named Thorfinn, who was a real Viking as well, although this manga obviously takes a lot of creative liberties with the character. There actually are a number of real-life Vikings in this series overall, such as Leif Erikson and Eric the Red, but obviously they have a lot of creative liberties taken with them too. But this series is incredibly deep. It taps into a lot of personal things regarding toxic masculinity, finding peace in a world of violence, familial trauma, and a lot of other themes that are obviously very relevant to this time period overall. While Demon Slayer was the anime that captured the entire world this year, Vinland Saga is by far the deeper anime, so I highly recommend you check it out. Another one that's actually a French animated film, much like Fantastic Planet that I mentioned last time, is The Triplets of Belleville. Much like Fantastic Planet was, this is a very quirky film that has a lot of very surreal imagery, but also a lot of very wholesome and interesting moments too. The plot is basically an old woman going on a quest to rescue her grandson Champion, who has been kidnapped by the French mafia for gambling purposes and taken to the city of Belleville. It's a very silly film, but honestly it has a lot of charm to it, and I definitely recommend it for sure. The last one I want to recommend for today is A Scanner Darkly, which is actually based on a Philip K. Dick story. This film is really unique in the sense that it actually uses live action actors, but it rotoscopes them into animation, giving it a very unsettling and unusual feel, which is very much a fitting thing given the source material here. There's sort of an eerie, existential, melancholy, Blade Runner-esque vibe to this film overall, which makes sense given it is Philip K. Dick. I love both Blade Runner and I love Blade Runner 2049 even more, so this is a real treat to watch. Highly recommend this, at least if you're into mind-bending philosophical sci-fi like Blade Runner. Overall, while adult animation is definitely in a very divisive spot right now, I think there's more proof than ever that really it is a viable art form that can tell really deeply impactful stories. If anything, all the films and shows that I just listed are living proof of that. The best thing we can do is just keep highlighting the good stuff and hope that studios listen. And really, I see a lot more value in enjoying the good stuff and highlighting that rather than focusing on the negative stuff. I hope in the future we'll see more films like Loving Vincent highlighted rather than fixed. But what do you think? What are your thoughts on the current state of adult animation today? And what are some of your favorite pieces of adult animation or more unknown animation? Let me know in the comments below. Regardless, thank you for watching till the end of the video, and I hope you enjoyed it or learned something new from it. If you like this video, be sure to give it a like and also consider subscribing as well. I do a lot of videos covering film and animation overall, so if you like this video, you'll probably like the other ones I have planned as well. You can also follow me on all the socials linked down below or join my Discord as well. You can also check out different reviews I do for movies and shows on my Letterboxd as well, which is linked down below. Special thanks to my patrons and YouTube members DDC1996, Trayvon Gibson, MNBY123, Balf Games, Jared the Rabbit, Hugh the Guardian, David Deister, Marky Fluffles, Geothermal Penguin, and Sasha Blasik for supporting me over there. I appreciate y'all pitching in with the extra monetary effort to keep me doing what I do here. It definitely means a lot. And I appreciate you for coming to the end of this video. Hope you enjoyed it or learned something new from it. But for now, I've been Otterly Noah, and I'll see you on the other side. Bye!